Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always, still coming in hot from Mexico. And my guest is coming in from Portugal, one of the best countries in the world. And can't wait to get this episode going. Time for the intro. Today we have Dr. Steven, Seven is his nickname, Waterhouse, on the show today, an active investor and builder in the crypto and Web3 space. With over 11 years of experience, Dr. Waterhouse is currently the CEO and co-founder of Orchid Labs, advisor to various projects, including RiscZero and Squid Router, and is CEO and co-founder of Nazare Ventures. That might have a little Portugal-esque influence to it. We'll get into that as well, which is a new fund focused on crypto and AI, highlighting his ambition to contribute towards the digital landscape of the future. Was also recently CTO and venture partner at Fabric Ventures, and holds a Ph.D. in engineering from Cambridge. Also received the Isaac Newton Prize for outstanding Ph.D. research and represented Cambridge in the rowing and water polo teams. That is so cool. Super pumped to have you on, Dr. Steven Waterhouse. Welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. What a long introduction.
I mean, it's well deserved. You've done a couple things. You know, it's well deserved.
Makes me sound old.
No, not at all. We gotta start with the nickname here, Doctor. What is Seven? Looks like Steven without the T. I feel like there's a good story behind that. What do you got?
It's Steven, no T. I mean, I used to live in England. We had a lot of T. Then we had no T. That was another bad joke. But when we started Orchid, there were two of us on the team, co-founders called Steve. And it was just kind of like a classic name collision this year. So I was like, guys, just like literally call me something else, right? And one of the guys was like, I'll just call you Seven. That's the easy way. Just lose one letter. And then it kind of stuck. I liked it. So I started introducing myself that way, and we got kind of busy, got kind of well known in the crypto space in 2017 and beyond, and the name grew. Now it's for a while I didn't like it. People called me anything else, but now I'm just like, as long as you're talking to me, I'm fine. So call me whatever you want.
I love it. Yeah, we have a couple nicknames. We could call you by your first name, Steven. We call you Doc, Doctor, Seven. I love it. I'm a big fan of nicknames. Played sports growing up. Nicknames are great. It's just a nice little personal way to connect into someone. Let's jump right into Orchid here. So many different ways around it, but tell me about sort of your personal journey into the blockchain space and privacy tech. What gets you going? What gets you excited about privacy tech and the inspiration behind Orchid? Why did you and your co-founder decide to start it?
So I got into what was originally called Bitcoin and then became called blockchain and then became called crypto, and now people call it Web3. So it's had a lot of names. I'm hoping we maybe get to another name because I'm not such a fan of Web3, but when you tell people you're in crypto, they get it kind of scared. So you have to say something else. Yeah. So I'd done a lot of tech, building companies, I'd sold companies, taken a company public, and then happened to be at a hedge fund. I was at Fortress Investment Group in early 2013. Fortress is a great firm. And I was working on intellectual property, a fund focused in that space. Decided I wanted to do something else after not very long at the firm. So I went up to Pete Brigger, who runs Fortress, and I said, hey, I think I'm out. I'm going to do something else. He goes, okay, so well, why don't you come back in a little while with another idea? And I was like, okay, sounds interesting. So I sent an email out to some friends, and I was like, hey, these guys in this hedge fund want me to come back with another idea. So like, anyone got any ideas? And a good friend of mine who's still in the space kind of Bitcoin pilled me. So he's like, I got a good idea. Let's try Bitcoin. And I went back, shouted to Pete, who was his business partner was Mike Novogratz, who you may know from Galaxy. And they said, we're already doing a bunch of Bitcoin things. We're buying Bitcoins. I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, what if we also invested in companies that were using Bitcoin, exchanges, people using them to do different. This was very early 2013. There wasn't a lot going on. I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea. That could maybe make it more interesting to have Bitcoins. I was like, maybe these things are useful for other things other than just storing them. And a few months later, we brought a guy in, to Fortress, a guy called Dan Moorhead, who had a hedge fund before called Pantera, and was taking a bit of a break from investing. And the idea was, well, let's try and do this digital currency fund, as we called it, inside Fortress. And Dan just brought an incredible amount of energy to the project, and really, really saw what could be done. Before you know it, we've got like investments in Zappo, Bitstamp, Circle. We bought a whole bunch of coins. Everyone's buying Bitcoins in Silicon Valley.
You guys were early.
Yeah. And then Fortress kind of got cold feet towards the end of the summer. Probably, I think, due to the Silk Road thing was kind of a bit of an issue at the time. So that happened. And then, so quite quickly, Dan decided, let's spin this thing out and just do it as Pantera. We got backing from Fortress and Benchmark and Rivet and spun it out. And that was the beginning of Pantera. So there's a lot of stories ever since then, but basically that's what got me started. And then was part of 2 venture funds at Pantera. And in 2016, towards the summer of 2016, I decided I really wanted to have another go at being a founder. Kind of wasn't quite ready to retire into the sunset and be a venture capitalist, even though being a venture capitalist is actually a lot of work. They always tell you that, but being a founder is real work. And so I was like, I'm going to go be a founder again. So I left and I had no idea what I was going to do, literally just like no clue. And at the time I had this slide deck. I was actually pulling it up the other day as I was going through new stuff for the new fund I'm doing. And it was like, I think the title of it was like Decentralized, Autonomous, and Secure, like the future of computing, right? And my thesis back then was that just like OpenAI was focusing at the time on, at the time it was this open source thing for AI. It's not so open source now, but at the time that's what the idea was. Basically the idea was like, do a lot of research in AI, publish it all to make sure that not so nice people don't get all the good AI research and do bad things, right? Well, have all the power, right? Now, unfortunately, that kind of looks like them, but that's an aside. That's a different podcast. And so my idea was, well, let's do that for security. Let's like figure out all of the different kind of ways you could sort of reinvent computing with security as the default components. Because even the web itself is like HTTP plus SSL. It's like security is always that afterthought. What if you could rebuild things with security as a foundational principle? And then the autonomous piece is like, I'm like, well, AI is going to be here or whatever. So I was running around Silicon Valley kind of looking for a sponsor for this, not so much venture, but kind of trying to find some people to just back this idea. Did some consulting at the time. And then I ran into some friends. I ran initially to Olaf from Polychain, and I was like, just talking about these ideas. And he's like, okay, well, that's cool, but have you looked at tokens? I was like, well, token what? And I'd been out of the space for maybe 2 months, but all of a sudden everyone's talking about tokens. That's what like happens in crypto. You miss something for a second. I was like, oh, right, yeah, ERC20 tokens. Okay, cool, yeah. Because I was starting this new fund just focus on tokens. I was like, cool. What can I do with that? And I started looking at it. And it suddenly occurred to me, like, oh, hang on a second. Why didn't we just try the idea that I've seen around? I think Naval had it originally. He published this thing about what if we tokenize Tor? What if we create an incentivized Tor based around the idea of ERC20s? And we don't often describe Orchid like that because we're not supposed to talk to things like Tor, but it's very much like the genesis of like what could you do if you created an incentivized overlay network was the basis for the original idea. I can only kind of take so much credit for that. It was really linking up with Jay Freeman, our CTO and co-founder, that really sort of put a lot of spark into this. Also, originally Gustav Simonson, who was a very early contributor to Ethereum, helped us a lot in these areas. And it became very clear very quickly in the summer of 2017 that not only was there a lot of interest in the idea, but that the ideas of trying to bring the concept of decentralization as it related to security and privacy and bringing that as kind of a core principle within the blockchain Web3 crypto ecosystem was possibly just as important as anything we could build. And so that journey towards not just building what we built, which is a decentralized VPN client effectively, just that allows you to build multiple hops in an overlay circuit or VPN circuit to give you extra privacy. Node providers are incentivized to use a crypto. In order to run a node, you stake Orchid, and you can basically build these decentralized networks. There's a lot of interesting technical challenges to solve there, including how to do payments, which we could talk about in a second. But this journey of like, how do you raise money for something that's focused on privacy? That was something that wasn't normal at the time. Zcash had done it, and I was one of the first investors in Zuko's project then, and the team, which became Starkware. But the idea that privacy was something that you could sell, probably something that could like get people interested, was sort of a strange idea back then, and then it became less strange over time. So that was an intro part of the journey.
That's wild. And like, again, this was such a fun one to do in regards to doing research for the show, yourself, Orchid, a whole bunch of other things. I have so many questions. I think my one that's present in mind right now we'll save for later, which is, sort of why you mentioned you were in capital raising, you were a VC, and then you wanted to go back to be a founder. We'll get to that at the end of the show because we're still buzzing on Orchid right now. You guys are literally fighting for internet freedom, which is something that's a pretty, it's a pretty big tagline. It's a pretty big sort of foundational oomph that you guys have. And one of the biggest trends in crypto right now is DePIN. You guys are all over this, one of the leaders in the space. I'd love if you could talk about how you guys are fighting for internet freedom, the importance of decentralized internet, decentralized VPNs, DePIN. And then again, one of my questions is, I fully don't understand how DePIN can work without incentivizing the node operators and users. And that you just nailed that on the head about 2 minutes ago. And that's the whole payments part of this equation. How do you pay people? How do you incentivize people to participate in a decentralized economy that focuses on security? So I'd love if you could just go for a nice rant on everything fighting for the internet and DePIN related.
Yeah, I'll back into the first part in a minute. I think we kind of realized at the time when we really started digging into how to do this, that this being Orchid, was that although a lot of problems had been solved, and people in crypto tend to think that crypto solves more technical problems than it has, just because we
big brains,
like,
big brains.
Satoshi, Satoshi and Vitalik are like, please help us. But certainly there's a lot of interesting problems that have been solved, Byzantine fault tolerance and Nakamoto consensus, and a lot of these kind of different things that have sometimes been dredged up from old research and brought into the spotlight, and tons of ideas in economics that have really been very theoretical, but people have actually been able to test and practice and use in practice. But the concept around decentralized infrastructure and just the concept of running some kind of service and being incentivized to do so and then consuming that and most likely paying to do so is not something that was really solved at all in the blockchain Web3 designs. But most people kind of assumed that it was. Now, the problem runs like this, which is that if you're running a service and I want to consume that service in some way, you've got storage or you've got VPN bandwidth, and I'm like, okay, I want to use your node. Let's take the VPN case. You're going to encrypt the data that I send you and you're going to send it on. That's your job. It's really simple. Just encrypt the data, send it on. Encrypt the data, send it on. Now I send it to you and you say, yeah, I did it. I'm like, but how do I know you? How do I know you can do it?
Yeah.
Like, did you just say you did it? You're like, yeah, I did it. Pay me. You're like, well, did you do it or not do it? That's one problem. And then the second problem is like, kind of like, however you do it, whether I pay you first or I pay you afterwards, you can still kind of fake it. You can still like kind of get away with not doing anything, or you can do the wrong thing, or you do something weird. And so when you're looking at with networking, the longer the packet of data, longer a piece of data that you're putting a payment associated with, let's say, the more you lose if the provider does something weird, falls over, doesn't mean to fall over, falls over anyway, does something weird, doesn't send it, pretends to send it, right? So what you want to do is try and make that network packet as small as possible, just get really, really small. And then send the payments with the network packet. And so if you do that, you can say, well, I'm going to lose sometimes, right? It's like, it's networking. Sometimes it doesn't mean to fall over, but it does. Yeah. Sometimes it's a bad person, whatever, all these things. But the amount that you're going to lose is tiny anyway. So it's like, it's okay. I'll just send it again. And then what you might try to make sure is that the amount of payment that you lose is also tiny. The way we did this was that we made it so that the payments are small on the order of a packet. And The packets are also small. But in order to do this, you get to levels of transactions per second that are like in a completely different realm to what we think about in blockchains. So what we do instead is we use nanopayments, or these probabilistic nanopayments, we call them, meaning that instead of guaranteeing that you get paid each time, I send you the chance of being paid. So basically, like I take some block.
Interesting.
I say like, here's $100. This is what you should get. This is what I'm going to get paid. I'll divide that into chances, and like no one gets anything, but one person gets 100. And you do that enough with like enough long-lived connections that it equals out, and everyone gets what they should have got in the first place. So these are called these probabilistic nanopayments. So that was a challenge that we had to figure out, and it's not. There are other approaches to this, but this is guys from LivePeer adopted this technique. Other people have adopted this technique as a way to do payments in these DePIN-like architectures. I think that when it comes to privacy and the concept of decentralization, it's something that we've talked a lot about over the years, and really tried to impress upon people is that you can talk a kind of a good game of privacy, but unless you really have a decentralized architecture, you can never really be sure. And I'll kind of use a more topical example today, which is everyone's favorite thing to talk about, ChatGPT. And the interesting thing about ChatGPT and agents, I'll call them in this more general sense, is that they have a very different flavor of kind of compelling prediction than anything we've used so far. So when you use Instagram, you're also using an AI. You're sitting there like you're consuming things it sends you, and you're like giving it signals, right? You're just using an AI. It's like it's a big AI at the back end giving you images of what people post. The algorithm, as people call it. You're feeding the algorithm. But you just talk into an AI, right? That's what it is. But the difference with that one is that everyone got very scared for a long time, and we had all these different movies about Facebook and we talked about that stuff, and everyone talking about owning your own data and so on. But at the end of the day, it's not really that scary. It's like Instagram is giving you better shopping recommendations. Like I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay. It's like it knows me, but like okay, I got a better food mixer ad. I think I'm good, right? Because I'm also not sitting there going, hang on, like, can I just change the algorithm a bit? Because I want to make sure that you didn't quite, that was wrong. Like, I don't actually want that kind of food mix. You got confused. I'm actually looking for celery juice, not celery juice makers. I want the juice. Like, it's like, right? You're not going to put that time into it. You're like, whatever, like, I'll figure it out later.
Just keep scrolling. When you're talking to
ChatGPT, if you really start digging into it and you start like giving it information about yourself and asking it to help you with this or help you with that, or what about this problem I'm facing? Can you just take a look at this chat message history and like go through this? How do you think I should respond to this negotiation I'm going through? Oh, you need more context on that person? Sure, let me go grab that. I'll bring this in here. You want to feed it. You actually want to give it as much as you can in a different way to the other systems we've had so far, which like own your data, right? And make money from your data. This is a completely different flavor. It's addictive. You want to give it. You want to feed it. You want to feed the algorithm. And that's why it's so much more important with the work that the crypto space is going on now. Like originally there's like crypto/AI tagline, which of course is just a subset in essentially of like decentralized private infrastructure. Was, all these same techniques are going to go there, was that it was almost like a meme. It's like, oh, these guys who do crypto is kind of screwed up, so they're going to do AI now, right? And I think a lot of people were doing that, but now everyone's come around and started thinking about it. And I was recently hanging out with Eric Voorhees at a conference, and he's a very, very focused libertarian crypto guy, like old school. People like that going around saying we have to focus on things like decentralized inference, decentralized training, decentralized models, because if a group, and I don't know that the OpenAI people are good people or bad people, it doesn't matter. Power corrupts.
Yeah.
And even if they want to be good, someone's going to ask them to not be good. Someone's going to force them to say, well, you know what, we're this big government thing, and like these people over here are bad, and like we need to know everything we can about them. I'm not as worried about AI becoming self-aware and doing all sorts of things and creating Skynet. I think a lot of this stuff is just people watching too much science fiction. I'm more concerned about our proclivity to give it everything, and for it then to be able to apply very sophisticated understanding and eventually reasoning about what you've told it about what other people who know you have told it and so on. And this thing's going to know you.
Yeah.
And if that's in the hands of one person, we really should be concerned. So it's kind of why I think this is becoming a more and more interesting and more topical space, because there are very interesting companies out there. There's ourselves. We're not supposed to talk about our competitors. I'm really impressed by what people have focused on in the cellular networking areas, in storage areas, in the work we've been doing in the video streaming. These are really interesting things. You want to get someone's interest in DePIN? Tell the story to someone. Tell them that story and say, this is why we need decentralized physical infrastructure. So you need to be able to solve that problem that not one person controls the algorithm.
Interesting. Let's keep buzzing on AI for a sec. I know you're very versed in the space. You studied it. You've done a whole bunch with it. How far away are we from, AI being just stupidly powerful? And it's already stupidly powerful. It's funny. I can't remember the last work day. Some days, I won't put in a full shift on a Saturday or Sunday, but Monday to Friday, I'm pretty much glued to the MacBook. I can't remember the last day. It's been that long that I have not had a ChatGPT tab open 24/7 for whatever use case possible, even for my own.
Have you tried talking to it yet?
Oh, like on the phone?
So, yeah.
All the time.
I'll do this where I'll just put it on in the car, and I'm taking a long drive or something. I used to listen to podcasts, and now half the time I'll sit there and talk to ChatGPT about something that I just found interesting, or try and break it, or try and jailbreak it, which is also kind of trying. Of course, I'm not trying. Sorry, AI, I'm not trying to jailbreak it. I'm always trying to test the boundaries and see what the guardrails will do, and it gets better. I think it's already stupidly powerful in the sense of we have this new ability to talk to a database, talk to a data set. Right? So think about it like that. It's like you have a new communication interface, and that is fascinating in itself. To go back to ancient history. So my Ph.D. I finished in 97, and I focused on. We actually were doing what people now call deep learning. The algorithm I focused on was called mixtures of experts, which is part of what Mistral uses, which is this new open source LLM. We were doing it for speech recognition, general AI didn't exist back then. And if you just look at the most popular one, ChatGPT, and the interfaces to it, there are multiple layers of AI and neural networks that go into making that work. Your ability to talk to it and for it to understand it. Yeah. And the speech recognition on it is just completely unparalleled. I've never seen anything like it. It's way better than anything else that's like actually on the market, so-called. And I guess this is sort of on the market, but it's not like I'm sitting there using it all the time as my dictation device, although you can. And I think that kind of thing is when I first started using it, I think I was more astounded by its speech recognition and synthesis than anything else that it was doing. And it was only later that I dropped in onto more text mode and started using it. Well, there was originally kind of like the chat 3.5 and so on, the text. But when I saw 4, and I was like, wow, this is just like a whole different thing.
Wild. And it's so quick too. The speed, the
ability to synthesize other people's voices, the ability to understand you. I think it's the convergence of these different components of so-called AI, that together will create this sense of something being incredibly powerful or incredibly sort of just really versatile. And of course, smaller models and different things will start to get embedded or used in CRMs or other things, but it's on day-to-day life. But I think the sense of what will it feel like to be very powerful will come from this convergence of a lot of systems working together, like in concert and harmony.
So it's so cool. I'm using it right now to help teach me Spanish. Like, you could pay a couple, and I have a Spanish tutor as well. I mean, I'm fluent in English. I mean, I'd hope so, and French. And because of the Latin derivative of French, it helps with the Spanish. But when I'm just messing around, I'll speak to it when I'm on a morning walk here in Mexico. Like it's incredible, and you can tell it to say a 30-word sentence, something very small in Spanish, and then give you the English translation right away. It's wild. So then I'm like getting it, right? Where online, there's not a lot of programs that do that, or they're a couple $100 a month. And it's not up to your speed. And it's absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love it. We got to take a quick break, give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show. And when we get back, we are going to keep buzzing on Orchid, keep buzzing on decentralization, AI, and Web3's convergence. And of course, we got to get into privacy in the digital age. Before then, huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends of CryptoNews.com and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. Prime XBT offers a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. The promo code is CryptoNews50. That is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, promo code CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Now back to the show with the doctor. Let's keep buzzing here. We sort of touched on DePIN for a sec, but I'd love to get into VPNs. Honestly, I owe this to the multiple guests that have come on and have spoke about VPNs on the podcast. I always knew they were important. I didn't know they were that important. Also learned a ton about them. Didn't know there is a finite amount of them. These are centralized VPNs. Always thought there were infinite. Turns out there isn't. It's a cool little fun fact. But the power of VPNs, why did you guys choose to build in those? I think I know the answer, but I'd love to hear you talk about it. And I'd love if you could also segue into just like the average person's lack of knowledge for internet privacy and how easily we can be hacked at any given time, because it is absolutely bananas. And just a small little thing like having a VPN helps a hell of a lot.
Yeah. The basic idea of a VPN is you're connecting, rather than connecting directly to a website, let's say, you're connecting to an intermediary who is encrypting and routing your data to that website. With the decentralized VPN or one where you have multiple of these things, you have the first node and then the second node. And by having two nodes in the architecture, you're able to have the person, the website who you're requesting the data from, no one can figure out what it is you're looking for and who you are being your IP address. Because the two things are never connected together. We looked at this area initially because we saw, really looking at the world of censorship and surveillance across the world globally, continuously.
Love this.
And at the time we started, was still a very unsolved problem. And there are the Chinese firewall is one of the best examples of this. The internet that most people in China see is a very different internet to the one that the rest of the world see. And you start getting educated after a while where you think, oh, it's so sad that they don't get Google. And you're like, after all, actually they don't care. They have their own thing. And they have their own thing for like everything you want.
Everything.
It's an enormous country and very sophisticated internet environment. But what they don't have is access to the same information that people outside of China have, and the censorship of information about the Tiananmen Square, for example, information about Tibet, just like basic aspects of Chinese history have been changed and censored.
That's wild.
Today, in the current conflicts that we're seeing around the world, there are clearly issues in Russia right now with what information is getting into Russia, what the average person in the street understands about it, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in the West. The list goes on and on, and you can go look through. There's a lot of resources out there talking about, for example, the Oslo Freedom Foundation, the Human Rights Foundation, and the Oslo Freedom Forum, which is in Oslo every year. The HRF focuses a lot on this issue of how do you avoid the world being just kind of run by awful dictators? How do you avoid the world going into that kind of that world? That becomes your reality if you're not careful. Someone was posting something today on Twitter, someone I follow, which was saying, even though we stand a lot for decentralization, if you really break down how you would get a stable coin, just take stable coins, for example, and how would you transact on that? The amount of KYC you've gone through and the amount of gates that are there to stop you from getting it mean that it's potentially the most surveilled financial instrument that we've created. And yet this is an industry that stands for decentralization and privacy and being libertarian, and yet we we don't. And we're constantly being tripped up by KYC AML issues and kind of this sort of what becomes a very strong like regulatory overreach, which ends up just being a more controlled system. Yeah, it's like, this is one of the things you have to think carefully about how you move to the future when you're building systems like we're building, that you're not making the problem worse. Some of the kind of sort of brutal realities of it, however, when you try and market these things, is that you realize that most people really want VPNs for moving between different regions, so pretending to be in a certain region versus being private. And so you end up with this realization that it's not so much the privacy component that people want, it's more the ability to kind of fake your location effectively. But some people want the privacy piece, and that's the people we're talking to, and that's the area that we can focus on.
It's very interesting, and that's something that, again, me myself, I guess I'm one of the few people who actually uses a VPN for privacy as well. But I just feel like more, and it's terrible of me to say, but it's like anything else in life where a lot of times when your back isn't against the wall, no magic happens. So unless hacks continue to happen to people with followings, people aren't really going to care about privacy, right? Until you've been hacked, you don't really give a shit. The reasons why I care about it is because I've gotten to speak to amazing people like yourselves, and I've had friends who've been hacked and compromised. One of the a little off topic, but one of the things that scares the shit out of me is this whole SIM swapping facade that's going on right now. Like, this is absurd. Like, people are getting SIM swap. I feel like every day I log onto Twitter and I see, got SIM swapped yesterday.
I got SIM swapped in 2016.
2016.
Yeah, there was a few of us back then, including some very notable people. Michael Turpin, I think, actually successfully sued AT&T or T-Mobile, one of the two. Yeah, that was the thing. That actually got me very activated initially around ideas around security, and probably led to me focusing on Orchid, even though it's an unrelated design. And I saw recently there's some crypto kind of anti-SIM swap application. I can't remember the name of it now, but somebody's looking at this area.
Ifani.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, Ifani. Had him on the pod. But we are getting a little tight for time here. A couple more questions. I want to go back to DePIN one last time here. I get asked about DePIN a lot. I can't explain it like you can. I'd love if you could give sort of like a, pretend you're back to the Ph.D. days. You have 100 me's in the class and you're giving a little lecture or helping out in some capacity. Could you sort of give the super high level, quick elevator pitch explanation on what DePIN is and why it's so important in a decentralized future?
Yeah, sure. Well, the concept of decentralization or distributed systems it goes down to the very earliest days of the internet. The internet itself is a decentralized architecture. It's designed to withstand a nuclear attack. That was the design thesis originally for DARPANET, ARPANET, before it became the internet. Yeah.
Really?
It's designed to withstand a nuclear attack, yeah.
Holy crap.
So the core routing design and infrastructure and the way the protocols are designed at the lowest level, I'm not talking about today's web, I'm talking about the internet itself, the lowest levels, are designed to be fully decentralized. The idea of decentralized systems is old, but over time, as we built out the first versions of the web, the way that you would run a server to have a web server was like, you put a big server down, get a bunch of people connect to it, you run some software on it. Maybe you want a copy of the server in case something goes wrong. Maybe you want a copy of the server and put it somewhere else in case something goes wrong. Maybe you want to have a load balancer that kind of makes sure that requests go through, right? And I worked at Sun Microsystems. I sold them a company back in the early 2000s. They were like, yeah, you can have a couple of these things, but one huge server is big enough to handle all your load. So you can put a few of these around the country if you like, but you don't need a bunch of smaller things. And at the time I was working on a storage project, strangely enough. And I lived through this problem. I'm like, these storage servers are getting really expensive. And I can kind of do the same thing with a whole bunch of really cheap servers with Intel chips or AMD chips. And I can run Linux on them. I can just build this distributed cluster of things and very large clusters of storage. And as we looked harder at this problem, we realized that you could do storage, but you could also do file system operations. You could do all sorts of different applications across this cluster or decentralized system the big server was doing. Not everything, but a lot of things. And over time, people have taken this kind of idea and then said, okay, well, kind of do more of this. And the back end of Apple, Google, Amazon, all these things, they're all based on these big decentralized distributed clusters of machines, right? We're familiar, like seeing these things going on. But it didn't always used to be like this. It used to be like often used the bigger things. So we kind of went from decentralized to more centralized. And then like now we're going to decentralized again inside the data centers. But the business models of the companies, which are mostly supported by advertising, don't lend themselves very well to being very decentralized, right? They're kind of like just more like, sure, put everything in one thing, right? One company does this one thing and everyone gets paid, and you take as much data as you can and put it in one place and suck it all in and monetize it, right? It's just, no one's trying to be evil or trying not to be evil. We should pick one, but they just end up in that business model because it makes sense. It's economic interest. We're in crypto, we understand this. So along comes crypto, originally with Bitcoin and then with Ethereum and then, and so on and so on. And this is a new idea which is like, oh, hang on a second, maybe we can have decentralized architectures that are widely available, like across a wide area, not just inside data centers, but like across a wide area. And that becomes the collection of blockchain families that we know and love. And now what's happening is people are taking the stuff I was talking about before, like, okay, what about the physical stuff? What about the machines? What about the things that give us resources like storage and compute and bandwidth and cell network capabilities and video streaming, and pick an application that needs something. And let's try and do what we did before with like making things in data centers, not just one machine, but more, and do the same across a wide area. And that's DePIN. So it's like decentralized machines doing things that are connected and incentivized using crypto. They're proven using crypto. People pay for them on a kind of more crypto level, small basis level to get things to happen. DePIN.
I love that. I maybe I'm way off here, but I see a world, a not too distant future. We'll call it 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I'm in Mexico. Instead of having the shitty Wi-Fi that is plentiful and everywhere here, I can find a DePIN Wi-Fi network. They're all over the place while I'm walking down Fifth Ave or anywhere, and just boom, connect. It's safe, it's secure. The node and the person who sets it up gets paid. I'm a happy guy. Everyone's happy. I'd love for that to happen sooner rather than later. So it's great to see companies like yourselves working towards that.
No, thanks for that. Yeah, it's been great chatting to you, and I think that's a very compelling vision of the future.
That'd be a treat. Doctor, before you let us go, can you please let us know where our listeners can find yourself personally and Orchid online and on socials?
Of course. My Twitter is D7Tral, which is DESEVEN 7 TRAL. So it's like decentral, but with 7 in the middle. Orchid Twitter handle is Orchid Protocol, and our website is just orchid.com. And from there, you'll also find our Twitter and Telegram, and more Discord now than Telegram. Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up. Find me on Twitter and we can chat.
What an episode. Folks, hope you all enjoyed Dr. SEVEN Waterhouse, co-founder and CEO of Orchid Labs. He was bringing the heat, everything DePIN, AI, decentralized VPNs, fighting for internet freedom, privacy, tech innovation, you name it. And of course, we got into everything Orchid as well. Huge shout out to SEVEN and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, I hope you did, please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking of the team, love you guys. Thank you for everything. Eustace, you are the man. Appreciate you as always. And back to the listeners, love you guys. Keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now, and we'll talk soon.